he says, anything happens that requires more than ordinary consideration, or I am out of humor upon any occasion, I still, by Hercules, long for my dear Tiberius, and those lines of Homer frequently occur to my thoughts.
Toutug hes pomenoio, kai ek puros ait homenoio, ampo nos desaimen, epe perioide no esai.
Bold from his prudence I could e'en aspire to dare with him the burning rage of fire. When I hear and read that you are much impaired by the continued fatigues you undergo, may the gods confound me if my whole frame does not tremble. So I beg you to spare yourself, lest, if we should hear of your being ill, the news prove fatal both to me and your mother, and the Roman people should be in peril for the safety of the empire. It matters nothing whether I be well or no, if you be not well. I pray heaven preserve you for us, and bless you with health both now and ever, if the gods have any regard for the Roman people. He did not make the death of Augustus public until he had taken off young Agrippa. He was slain by a tribune who commanded his guard upon reading a written order for that purpose, respecting which order it was then a doubt whether Augustus left it in his last moments, to prevent any occasion of public disturbance after his decease, or Livia issued it in the name of Augustus, and whether with the knowledge of Tiberius or not. When the tribune came to inform him that he had executed his command, he replied, I commanded you no such thing, and you must answer for it to the senate, avoiding, as it seems, the odium of the act for that time, and the affair was soon buried in silence. Having summoned the senate to meet by virtue of his tribunitian authority, and begun a mournful speech, he drew a deep sigh, as if unable to support himself under his affliction, and wishing that not his voice only, but his very breath of life, might fail him, gave his speech to his son Drusus to read. Augustus' will was then brought in, and read by a freedman, none of the witnesses to it being admitted, but such as were of the senatorian order, the rest owning their handwriting without doors. The will began thus: Since my ill fortune has deprived me of my two sons, Caius and Lucius, let Tiberius Caesar be heir to 2/3 of my estate. These words countenanced the suspicion of those who were of opinion that Tiberius was appointed successor more out of necessity than choice, since Augustus could not refrain from prefacing his will in that manner. Though he made no scruple to assume and exercise immediately the imperial authority by giving orders that he should be attended by the guards, who were the security and badge of the supreme power, yet he affected by a most impudent piece of acting to refuse it for a long time, one while sharply reprehending his friends who entreated him to accept it, as little knowing what a monster the government was, another while keeping in suspense the senate when they implored him and threw themselves at his feet by ambiguous answers and crafty kind of dissimulation, insomuch that some were out of patience, and one cried out during the confusion, either let him accept it or decline it at once, and the second told him to his face, others are slow to perform what they promise, but you are slow to promise what you actually perform. At last, as if forced to it, and complaining of the miserable and burdensome service imposed upon him, he accepted the government, not, however, without giving hopes of his resigning it some time or other. The exact words he used were these: "Until the time shall come when you may think it reasonable to give some rest to my old age." The cause of his long demur was fear of the dangers which threatened him on all hands, insomuch that he said, "I have got a wolf by the ears." For a slave of Agrippa's, Clemens by name, had drawn together a considerable force to revenge his master's death. Lucius Scribonius Libo, a senator of the first distinction, was secretly fomenting a rebellion, and the troops both in Illyricum and Germany were mutinous. Both armies insisted upon high demands, particularly that their pay should be made equal to that of the Praetorian Guards. The army in Germany absolutely refused to acknowledge a prince who who was not their own choice, and urged with all possible importunity Germanicus, who commanded them, to take the government on himself, though he obstinately refused it. It was Tiberius' apprehension from this quarter which made him request the senate to assign him some part only in the administration, such as they should judge proper, since no man could be sufficient for the whole, without one or more to assist him. He pretended likewise to be in a bad state of health, that Germanicus might the more patiently wait, in hopes of speedily succeeding him, or at least of being admitted to be a colleague in the government. When the mutinies in the armies were suppressed, he got Clemens into his hands by stratagem. That he might not begin his reign by an act of severity, he did not call Libo to an account before the senate until his second year, being content in the meantime with taking proper precautions for his own security. For upon Libo's attending a sacrifice amongst the high priests, instead of the usual knife, he ordered one of lead to be given him; and when he desired a private conference with him, he would not grant his request, but on condition that his son Drusus should be present, and as they walked together, he held him fast by the right hand, under the pretence of leaning upon him, until the conversation was over. When he was delivered from his apprehensions, his behavior at first was unassuming, and he did not carry himself much above the level of a private person, and of the many and great honors offered him, he accepted but few, and such as were very moderate. His birthday, which happened to fall at the time of the plebeian Circensian games, he with difficulty suffered to be honored, with the addition of only a single chariot drawn by 2 horses. He forbade temples, flamens, or priests to be appointed for him, as likewise the erection of any statues or effigies for him, without his permission; and this he granted only on condition that they should not be placed among the images of the gods, but only amongst the ornaments of houses. He also interposed to prevent the senate from swearing to maintain his acts, and the month September from being called Tiberius, and October being named after Livia. The praenomen likewise of emperor, with the cognomen of father of his country, and a civic crown in the vestibule of his house, he would not accept. He never used the name of Augustus, although he inherited it, in any of his letters, excepting those addressed to kings and princes. Nor had he more than 3 consulships, one for a few days, another for 3 months, and a third during his absence from the city until the Ides, 15th of May. He had such an aversion to flattery that he would never suffer any senator to approach his litter as he passed the streets in it, either to pay him a civility or upon business. And when a man of consular rank, in begging his pardon for some offense he had given him, attempted to fall at his feet, he started from him in such haste that he stumbled and fell. If any compliment was paid him, either in conversation or a set speech, he would not scruple to interrupt and reprimand the party, and alter what he had said. Being once called Lord by some person, he desired that he might no more be affronted in that manner; when another, to excite veneration, called his occupation sacred, and a third had expressed himself thus: "By your authority I have waited upon the senate," he obliged them to change their phrases, in one of them adopting persuasion instead of authority, and in the other laborious instead of sacred. He remained unmoved at all the aspersions, scandalous reports, and lampoons which were spread against him or his relations, declaring, in a free state both the tongue and the mind ought to be free. Upon the senate desiring that some notice might be taken of those offences, and the persons charged with them, he replied: "We have not so much time upon our hands that we ought to involve ourselves in more business. If you once make an opening for such proceedings, you will soon have nothing else to do. All private quarrels will be brought before you under that pretence." There is also on record another sentence used by him in the senate, which is far from assuming: "If he speaks otherwise of me, I shall take care to behave in such a manner as to be able to give a good account both of my words and actions, and if he persists, I shall hate him in my heart."